This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoy this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and you can pitch future Critical Thought topics. Alright everybody, a lot to go over before we get to today's Critical Thought. First, we are less than 1 week away from my first live presentation I will be giving. If you're going to be in the South Jersey area this Saturday, that is March 11th, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll be at my local library talking about the arcade industry. So if you're in the area, be sure to stop in. You can make fun of me. You can throw some ideas or critical thoughts. We can have a whole little fun time there. Now, the other bit of news, I recently discovered that my last few videos I was sounding extra loud. And it turns out when we did the Discord chat last Thursday, that Discord raised the volume of my mic to full when I usually keep it around 65-68%. So you may have noticed it sounded like I was yelling a lot more than I was normally. But I lowered it since then, and hopefully that will stay. And I'll just have to pay attention to it when we use Discord, hopefully this Thursday. One last thing before we start with today's Critical Thought. I asked folks if they would like to see a Nier Automata Let's Play on the channel, and no one said no, so I think we're going to go ahead and do it. The Neo Let's Play, especially some of the videos I put out, kind of exploded in terms of views, so I figure we're going to try to remain semi-relevant once again. So I'll be picking up the game thanks to PSN. And again, as we talked about with like digital stores and stuff, or actually that will be an upcoming Critical Thought. I just spoiled it. But as we're going to talk about, I'm going to be able to pick it up and start downloading it tonight. I don't know if I'll be able to play it tonight, but I can certainly play it tomorrow. And as this has always been an iterative process, what I've decided to do with the Nier Automata play is whatever I stream the night before, I'm going to probably upload to the channel the following day. So if we play for 1 hour, you'll get 1 hour of content. If I play for 2, you'll get 2 1-hour videos, and we'll go from there. If it looks like things are starting to run long, like when I did the Two Kings play for like 2 hours on New Game Plus, that will of course get cut for the YouTube audience. But I figured this way, this will allow me to blaze through Nier on the stream and to get through those videos quickly here for those of you who want to keep updated on that. Because I think the problem I ran into with Neo is by saving it by, half, every other day, that it was taking a very long time to get through, and by the time I was getting through those videos, everyone's already seen everything that has to do with it. So unless you guys have any complaints or suggestions otherwise, I think I'll go forward with that. And if it looks like things are getting a little bit too overloaded, be sure to let me know and I can always cut back on the videos. But that'll be kind of things to look forward to going in the next few days. But let's get today's Critical Thought, and this is going to be a good one. We're talking about the challenges of adding randomized elements in competitive games. I know that's not exactly the most elegant title, but this is going to be based on today's post, which can be linked below, which is actually based on a Game Wisdom Live from 2 weeks ago. And what we were talking about was how more competitive games have been experimenting with randomized or unpredictable elements when it came to their progression. On the Game Wisdom Live, we talked specifically about For Honor and Injustice 2. And if you missed the news, For Honor features a gear progression system. You can either find gear after each battle, or you can spend in-game currency to get like a random draw. And what happens is, as you level up your character's account, your character's level, the gear you find becomes stronger. So if I'm wearing like a level 5 gauntlets on my arms, if I find level 10 gauntlets 5 levels later, they're going to have much better stats than those level 5. And again, this is completely, I believe it's randomly generated, so it's not from a set pool. And Injustice 2, from what we've heard, is doing something similar. After each battle, you get a random piece of gear, can come in different rarities, and affect different aspects of that character. So maybe a piece of gear can make Superman's heat vision shoot out maybe a little bit faster, or do a little bit more damage, and stuff along those lines. And what we talked about on the Critical Thought was a very simple discussion, or simple topic, but can get a lot complicated. Why aren't competitive fans or competitive gamers fans of random variances in competitive games, but titles like League of Legends, Dota 2, and even CCGs can get away with that unpredictability of the games? And as you see in a LoL or Dota match, whatever items the players can pick in the store can radically change their build and their strategy, much like having a unique deck in Hearthstone or Gwent or anything like that. But why is that okay? A few years ago, Capcom experimented with Street Fighter Cross Tekken, which added in this gem system that allowed you to add random benefits to your characters based on what gems you got. And the game just flopped when it came to the competitive audience. They didn't want any of it, and the game quickly died a mysterious death at EVO. But why, in that case, was it bad? But people have flocked to LoL, Dota, and all those CCGs we mentioned. And from the post, I theorize that it has to do with how these items or this unpredictability is presented to the players. When we look at games like the CCGs, LoL, and even something like Mortal Kombat 10 that has those different styles, the unpredictability is coming from a fixed pool. I know when I play Hearthstone that I have, all these cards to play with. If I'm playing Mortal Kombat, I know that even though there are different styles, each style is fixed. I'm not going to run into a Sub-Zero who will make use of two different styles worth of moves. Much like in Hearthstone, I know if I'm playing a warrior, I'm not going to expect him to play a polymorph card. And when there is this fix in terms of how unpredictable a game can be, it can be planned around. One of the cornerstones of competitive video games compared to real life sports is that video games typically deal with asymmetrical balance, meaning my guy is different from your guy or my options are different from yours. When we look at stuff like football, tennis, soccer, you name it, we're dealing with fixed rules or regulations for both sides. I know my football team will have the same kind of players as your football team. But when it comes to video games, we typically have this asymmetrical balance. In the post, I talked about like Street Fighter V. If I'm playing a Guile in the game, I know that his Guile is going to be different if I'm playing compared to me if I'm playing Ryu. But I know if I'm high enough in skill or knowledge of the game, exactly what the Guile can do in terms of what combos he can pull out, his ranges, what special moves, etc. So that is kind of the fix part of that unpredictability. Even something like Team Fortress, that has dozens and dozens and dozens of items at this point, is still having a fixed pull. I know if I'm using, it's been too long, so I don't remember any of the names of the Team Fortress items, but if someone has the same item as me, I know that he has the exact same advantages and disadvantages that I do. And that, I think, is why competitive fans or competitive gamers are fine with that. But when we talk about games like For Honor, Injustice, and Street Fighter Cross Tekken, we're dealing with randomization. These are items that aren't set in the game. You never know what you're going to get or when. I could get some super rare item in Injustice 2 that makes my Superman, again, have increased damage potential, and you may not get that. It could take you hours of play, or you may never even see that item, but that's something that I have that you don't. And this is, I think, where competitive gamers tend to annoy or get annoyed at this kind of randomization, because it's not something that's controlled. But on the flip side, when you have fixed choices, there's always a limit of how much variance there is there. In StarCraft, for example, I know that there's what the matchups can be. It can be Zerg versus Protoss, Zerg versus Terran, Zerg versus Zerg, and then we can repeat for the other two. But with those fixed limits, that limits exactly what I can do with playing those characters or playing against them. And for those of you who watch competitive StarCraft or who still follow it, I'm kind of curious about this next point. One of the things that stopped me or kind of dragged my interest in the competitive StarCraft scene was how high-level play seemed to devolve into is basically specific build orders. And it became less about what you do in the match and what build orders you come up with beforehand. And what ended up happening was it kind of felt like the game was decided before we even started. One of the things that I like about watching competitive fighting games is that there's a lot of improvisation that goes on between two high level players. You may have a plan going in, or you may know what combos you want to use, but you still have to read your opponent. You still have to figure out what they're doing and then manage or compensate for it. But with that said, the challenge, of course, is whenever we have these fixed limits, again, there will always be a preferred option. There will always be something that is superior to everything else. And as we've talked about before, Hearthstone is really the current, quintessential example of this. Blizzard has been in an unending war of trying to keep an established meta happening in Hearthstone. And remember, for every new card that gets added, yes, the meta gets shaken up for a few days, but it won't take long for a high-level player to figure out the best things. And we talked about that in an earlier critical thought. If you want your game to be broken, or if you want to find exactly what are the overpowered items or options, give it to a competitive player. It doesn't matter if you have 20 items, 50 items, 100 items. They will figure it out and they will break your game. And that's the issue that's been running with Hearthstone. Because even though they add new cards in, they change old cards and stuff along those lines, we're still dealing with fixed items, with fixed constants. So, for me personally, I want to get your thoughts on this. When I think about either unpredictability or randomization in competitive games, I'm for it. And for those of you watching this, I want to get your thoughts. What do you think about this? Should more competitive games have these randomized elements to it, or should they stick with set pools of items? Because for me, this is what kills my interest in watching any kind of sporting event, because it's going to generally play the same way each time because of how the regulations work. Now, of course, that is the main point of things. The difference comes down to, obviously, the players. We're not dealing with, football teams that are clones of each other. So, for instance, imagine if at EVO, for the next Street Fighter V tournament, everyone plays Ryu. It's just nothing but 10 straight hours of Ryu versus Ryu matches. That would get boring no matter who's playing it, because again, there's only so much you can do with a fixed constant. Even you have the two greatest players in the world playing, if all they're doing is playing against Ryu, it's going to all start to blur together eventually. Now, with that said, of course, this brings up the other major point where we'll probably go to end today's critical thought. How much should randomization or abstraction factor into these games? And this is not an easy question to answer. It's one that I've been thinking about for the last few years. I've gone back to this go-to example multiple times, and if you're a fan or an older fan of Game Wisdom, you know what's coming next. If you have two people racing each other, one is the best driver in the world, and you put him behind a lemon, and then you take someone who's barely driven at all and give them a $1 million supercar, who should win in that race? Should skill trump equipment? Or should it be vice versa? And that is not an easy answer or easy question to answer. Going back to For Honor, another question for you folks. Do you think For Honor is going to have a competitive following? My honest opinion is I don't think so. I think the randomization is too much out of the player's control that it won't be as popular. Because I can just imagine, a professional EVO tournament, two players, going at it, and because one player has a rarer piece of gear, that it gives them the edge. That would drive competitive gamers nuts. Now, I know with that said, one option, of course, is to turn off these items, but then I think that loses a lot of the allure of this kind of unpredictability. In the post, I talked about the idea of street racing, and how people who street race, they're not using regulation cars. They're not using a set car type that they all go to the dealership for. Chances are these cars are custom built. Now, of course, once again, we have a limit or a fixed pool of parts. There's only so many high performance wheels or engines or insert car part here for you gearheads out there. But what someone does is build the car specifically for them. And when they race, it's not just about their skill at the wheel, but their skill at building cars. And that kind of customization, I think, really lends itself well to it, and why I enjoy watching CCG games, where it's not just about your skill at playing the game, it's about building a customized deck to your preference. And that's why I'm really interested to see how Injustice 2 would work. Because I don't want to just see, my Superman versus your Batman. I want to see my Superman who's been customized exactly to my specifications with items versus your Batman who's been, again, who has been personally customized to your specifications. And we can see who is the better character builder as well as who's the better player. But again, that takes us back to the big question. How much should those items factor in? If I'm playing against a better player in Injustice, but I have better items, should I have the advantage? Because I know what some of you are going to say right now, it should be no. But if you want these items to matter, they have to offer some kind of an impact. Giving me heat vision that does 0.00005% more damage is not going to mean much. But on the other hand, if you give me an item that lets my heat vision do 20% more damage, that could very well be game-breaking. It probably would be game-breaking if we think about it. And that's the other major rub and what we'll end on for today, is that when we talk about balancing these kinds of games, these are some of the hardest games to fine-tune, as we talked about with the Hearthstone example. And I'm very interested in seeing what CD Projekt Red is going to do with Gwent going forward. Like I said, I've been starting to follow it myself, and I'm really enjoying it. But like I said, when it comes to these kinds of games with a fixed limit of variance with their items or their cards or whatever, you really need a careful approach when it comes to balancing. Again, we mentioned this before, but even changing one mana cost on a card in Hearthstone can completely break decks and strategies and meta, as we've seen multiple times. So let's wrap things up here before we talk for another 20 minutes. So again, this is not an easy question to answer when it comes to having randomized elements or unpredictability in competitive games. Once again, for those of you watching this, what do you think about these kinds of randomized items? Do you think we could see a competitive game that embraces them? Do you think we'll still stick with the fixed elements? And again, a fixed pool of items, choices, builds, whatever. And for those of you who do watch competitive games, what kind of competitive games do you typically follow? Like I said, for me, I like to watch fighting games due to the improvisation that goes on, and I've been enjoying CCGs due to the customized decks. So, what kind of games do you like to watch? And I'm sure we'll be returning back to this topic time and again. So with that said, thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. Be sure to tune in, I hope, real soon for some plays of Nier Automata. If you're in Cherry Hill on Saturday, be sure to stop in and say hi. If I'm not going to succumb to hyperventilating and pressure from talking in public, but we'll see what happens as the week goes on. And be sure to check back daily for more great content here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. So until tomorrow, have a great night. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day. and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GW Bycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.